I'll give you an example. Stay with me. You cannot take a breath before giving one. I'm staring at the camera, so you really just deep what I said, and that is something that should go into your notes. Exchange is woven into the fabric of your being. You cannot take a breath before giving one. It's the same way how nitrogen is something that is within the atmosphere and then it's, gone into its nitrogen cycle for whatever reason in the environment. It's the same way that, the nutrients of the soil must be given up to the plant in order for the plant to then produce oxygen to go back out into the atmosphere. Everything revolves around exchange. So the idea that you're going to materialize your desired reality without you being willing to give something up, it's scandalous. It's just scandalous, and it doesn't work like that. Take the simple concept of what I've just pointed out here. Try to take a breath before giving one. Try it. You can't. The reason? This is how the universe works. Exchange is the basis of the universe. It is inescapable. Unfortunately, it's inescapable. And so long as you try to remain who you are, you'll be depriving who you can become. Damn, that was a bar. Make sure you write that one down too. Now, understanding what I just said, just to reiterate, you cannot take a breath before giving one. Now, this simple analogy can be extrapolated to any aspect of you moving towards your desired reality. You cannot take your desired reality before giving your current one. And it's very important for you to be able to sacrifice something in order for that to happen. Also, I'm seeing comments about people complaining about the way that I clean my whiteboard. Nigga, if you got a problem with it, come clean my whiteboard for me. We'll have no issues. Now, here's what you have to understand about sacrifice. And if at any point you don't understand what I'm saying, or at some point I lose you, rewind and rewatch. Because unfortunately, sometimes when you hear these concepts, it doesn't really hit your mind the way that it should. Take the word sacrifice in of itself. You associate it with all them nigga conspiracy videos on YouTube of this and this and this celebrity who did this and this and that. You need to start watching all of that stuff. And I say that as somebody who studied all of that stuff. You must always remember that the universe is entirely mental. This is the first hermetic principle. It is foundational. It is quite literally the basis of your universe, which is the idea that reality is orchestrated and structured around your mind literally being the blueprint and the architect of your reality. And if you're diving into those conspiracy videos, what is the actual return on investment that you're getting? Because everything is an investment. Every bit of attention, every thought, every emotion creates the output of your frequency, which is the product code of the reality that you receive. So when you're watching all of these videos, it sounds cool to know, but what is the actual benefit of you doing that? When I was watching all them videos, that was probably the roughest time of my life. Nigga, I was depressed. I was just like, damn, this is what's really going on. And always remember, spirituality without the ability to control your reality is vanity. Step away from that. Now, going back to what I was saying about sacrifice, we need to redefine what sacrifice means in your head, because sacrifice in your head is giving up something that you really care about. But this is how the universe understands sacrifice. This is how you should look at sacrifice, which is giving something up of a lower nature to receive something of a higher nature. This is sacrifice. And I really want you to think about it like this. Take nature's most beautiful example of transformation and elevation. The caterpillar must sacrifice its current state in order to become the butterfly. It is giving something up of a lower nature in order to receive something of a higher nature. This is what sacrifice truly is. The lower nature, for the very purposes of what I'm trying to explain here, can be conceptualized as your current reality. And the higher nature can be conceived as your desired reality. And until you're really willing to give up your lower nature, you can never receive your higher nature. That's literally what it is. You know, most of the time, people don't have a problem materializing anything. What they have a problem with is the attachment to their current state. Now, you may be in your current state thinking, I don't like this, I don't want this, but it's not about what you want. And I'll give you this example. Let's say you go to a foreign country. You're in a foreign country, you don't speak the language, they don't speak whatever language you speak. You go to a restaurant, you don't understand each other, but you understand the base process of it. A waiter comes over, he says whatever, takes you to your seat. Gives you a menu. You don't understand what he's saying, you don't understand what he's saying, he doesn't understand what you're saying, but he gives you the menu, you get the gist of it. Now, the waiter goes away to give you some time. He comes back, and you open your menu, and you point to the fish, and you say, I really don't want the fish. You're looking at him, I really don't want the fish, and you're pointing to it like, please don't give me the fish. You close the menu and then say, I'll have the steak. What do you think he's going to bring you? It's not about what you want. It's about where you're focusing upon, because your focus is a centralization of energy. You may think that you don't want your current reality, but the truth of the matter is, wherever you're focusing on is exactly where you're investing in, and reality is always going to bring a return. You need to see everything as an investment. Your placement of attention, your placement of thought, and your placement of emotion. I can see AJ nodding his head, so that means the nigga's spitting right now, no diddy. And it's very important for you to understand that regardless of your current situation, where you might think is something that you don't want, the universal currencies, which I'll make a separate video on, is exactly what you're depositing to receive your current reality. And to give, in order to give this up, we're gonna have to change everything. We're really gonna have to change anything. Because remember what I said, in order to go somewhere you've never been, you need to become someone you've never been. You can't stay the same and expect reality to change. That isn't how reality works, because reality is as within, as without. First part, most important part of this sentence is as within, as without. It is the within that precedes the without. Never get confused in playing the game. If you're confused about that, go watch my video, How to Outsmart Reality. You should understand the correct order of which reality is governed, because in order for you to actually go somewhere you've never been, you need to become someone you've never been, and you better be taking notes. If you're not taking notes, leave and unsubscribe. I really don't even care. What I want you to do is to actually internalize this information, to then put it into practice, so then you can actually change your reality. I don't want niggas watching me for fun. Really, I don't even know how that makes sense. But anyways, once again, you're going to have to sacrifice your entire paradigm. And here's the thing. When I get into who specifically you need to sacrifice, it's all gonna make sense. But what I want you to understand is this. And stay with me now. By the way, I just want to say, for those of you who actually never comment on YouTube videos, because I'm one of those people too, and you're commenting on mine, I genuinely appreciate it. That isn't an understatement. There's a reason why I literally reply to every single comment. Every morning I wake up and reply to every single comment throughout the day. Me and AJ would be like, oh, did you see this comment? Did you see this comment? I really do appreciate it. I'm not some nigga who's just saying that. I really do see everything, which is why I bring up these comments in the videos that you lot be dropping, and it's hilarious. But what I want you to understand is this, and I briefly touched upon this, but I just want to reiterate it. Every day, and you really need to break it down as in every day you barter with the universe. And all that means is you exchange with the universe. You need to see your reality as a ROI, a return on investment, a return on investment from whatever it is that you're investing. And you don't barter the universe with what you want. Once again, go back to that restaurant example, which should have given you a light bulb moment in your head. It doesn't matter what you want. The universe doesn't care about that, because what you want doesn't lead to the output of your frequency. You barter with the universe. You communicate with the universe every single day, for you are a microcosm of the universe. You are quite literally the universe, which is why, as Bobby Hemmett said, you need to stop thinking like a human and start thinking like a god. Shout out to him. But going back to what I was saying. Oh, somebody asked me who my favorite spiritual teachers are. I'd probably say Homelander and Franklin Saint in the final season of Snowfall at the end. Now, you have to understand, when it comes to bartering with the universe, what you're exchanging with the universe is always going to be these things. And these are a consistent theme throughout all of my videos. And you really have to understand this. It is always going to be your beliefs. It is always going to be your thoughts. It is always going to be your attention, emotional conviction, and it's always going to be your identity. These are the things that you're exchanging with the universe every single day. Listen, you can play around with me, nigga. I see all the time people put on the spiritual outfits, the vegan sandals. No disrespect to the vegans. They came at me on smoke in the comments. I don't want smoke with you. Like, you can fool anybody, but you can't fool the universe. You really can't. And the reason I say you can't for the universe is because you are the universe, and you're forever going to be outputting the signal. You can play around and do all of this, grand rising, shea butter, CMOS shit, but your life isn't changing. And it's for the mere fact that the output of what your frequency is, which is all of these things, which, some people would refer to this as a self-concept, the totality of your self-concept, but really and truly it's your frequency. These are the things that you're exchanging with the universe on a daily basis. So think about it. Every day when you wake up, what is the beliefs you're going out into the world with? What are the thoughts that you're going out into the world with? And when I say thoughts, I really do want to emphasize that I just don't mean regular thoughts. In the spiritual community, they overemphasize on thoughts, but thoughts aren't as powerful as you think. The basis of your frequency is always going to be more associated with emotion. Emotion is the language of God. Emotion is the language of the subconscious mind. Emotion is energy emotion, which emits an energetic signature which goes beyond the third dimensional realm and has the ability to tap into the quantum field. Your heart is the most spiritual organ you have. Hence why before babies develop brains, they develop hearts. Your heart has its own brain. And the heart has an electromagnetic field which is 60 to 100 times larger than that of the brain. Hence why your heart is the magnet through which you pull everything from, which is why in Proverbs 4:23 it says, guard your heart because life springs from this. This is why in ancient Kemetic traditions, your heart was weighed. This is why you say, I know that song off by heart. Now, going back to that, when I say thoughts, I always want you to remember it's thoughts that are emotionally charged. Normal thoughts, they don't really mean shit, unfortunately. It's the thoughts that are emotionally charged. Every day you exchange these things with the universe. Your attention, your emotional conviction, your identity, which then creates the totality of a self-concept, which then emits a frequency, which then chews you into a particular reality. These are the things you're exchanging every day with the universe. Now, in order for you to go somewhere you've never been, you need to, I hope you said it. All of these things are gonna have to change. You're gonna have to sacrifice every single one of these things, because until you're truly willing to sacrifice every aspect of one of these things, you're never going to move in the direction you want. And this goes beyond the simplistic stuff of, oh, I'm just gonna change my thoughts and start positive thinking. toxic positivity ain't gonna change your life, nigga. I promise you right now. More important than positive thinking is right thinking in reference to your desired reality. You're going to have to alter your attention. You're going to alter what you are emotionally convinced of to be the truth. You're going to have to completely alter the identity that you have been given by reality. Listen, before you're black, before you're a woman, before you're a man, before you're 5 foot, before you're 6'4", before you're a bum, before you're a loser, before you're a king, before you're a queen, before any label that anybody can ever attribute to you, that is what you are. And that is free from any third dimensional realm confinement, because really and truly anything within the third dimensional realm is trapped within the illusion of duality or polarity, which means that it's going to be hindered to any capacity. And in order for you to transcend your reality, you're going to have to transcend the third dimensional realm and its constraints. Now, let's get to the sacrifice. Now, I'm gonna be real with you. Like I said, your family were right. They told you to stop watching them spiritual videos and to come back to Jesus and, you know, accept him as your savior, because all of that stuff is evil. Because now I'm about to tell you some evil stuff. Unfortunately, it's over for you. It's really over for you. You should have listened. You should have never clicked on this video with a nigga in a do-rag and a chain, because, well, you know, what could I possibly teach you about anything? You know what I mean? Because unfortunately, you are going to have to sacrifice somebody. Now, if you've made it this far, I guess I can say the jig is up, as they say. And you know the individual that must be sacrificed. Now, the truth of the matter is, you've known this individual your whole life. They've been with you through ups and downs. They've had your back. They've also abandoned you. They've let you down. They've lifted you up. And they've really experienced every single thing with you that you possibly can. And that individual that you're going to have to sacrifice is you. Nah, I'm joking, it's not froze. You're gonna have to sacrifice you. You're really gonna have to sacrifice you. What specifically you're going to have to sacrifice is your current self. You're going to have to sacrifice your current self in order to receive your desired self. You can't have both at the same time. You can't sit in 2 chairs at once. You can't sleep in 2 beds at once. You chase 2 rabbits at the same time, you catch neither. You're gonna have to make a decision right now on this video. Comment, are you choosing your current self or your desired self? You can only choose one. And if you say current self, nigga, just leave. I don't even know why you're here. Because the only thing you should be moving towards is your desired self, which is exactly what I'm here to help you do. Now, in order to do this, you're going to have to give up your worries, what you allow to stress you, what you allow to excite you, what you allow to anger you. You're going to have to give up your viewpoint. You're going to have to give up your perception. You're going to have to give up. What else do you have to give up? It's a pretty good list, don't you think? Where you're placing your attention, but more specifically, what you actually allow to capture your attention. You're going to have to give up all of these things. Each and every single one of them. Because until you give them up, because remember, the definition of sacrifice isn't to lose something that is important to you. It's to give up something of a lower nature in order to receive something of a higher nature. And this is the lower nature and this is the higher nature. You're going to have to give up what you allow to worry you. Unfortunately, I promise you this right now. You're not going to have the same worries in your desired self as you do currently have in your current self. You're not. So when these worries pop up, you have the opportunity to choose between these 2 frequencies. And every day you're bartering with the universe. Every day you're walking up to the counter of reality and saying, hey, I'll give you this if you give me that. But remember, it's not about what you want. It's about the output of your frequency, which comes down to those 5 elements that I've broken down. what you allow to currently stress you isn't going to be the same in your desired self as it is your current self. And here's the thing. The universe is always going to try to do this one thing. Or if you can remember this alone, the way that you navigate reality is going to be completely different, and that is a promise. It just wants this one thing from you. It just wants an emotional reaction. That's it. So whenever something pops up that's really testing you, or really trying you, or really, G-checking you, as we say over here, you have the opportunity to choose between one or two frequencies. Every choice, every reaction is a choice of frequency. You're forever choosing the frequency that you want to build. You're never not choosing. Unfortunately, there ain't no days off. There's no days off. Because like I was saying, the things that are going to be stressing you in your desired reality aren't the things that are going to be stressing you currently now. And so long as this can worry you, stress you, you're going to stay within this current self. Which means you're going to have to exercise a level of emotional resilience. Because until you can rise above the internal stress, the external stress is never going to decrease. It's never going to decrease. And one of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite philosophers and authors, by a man called James Allen, he said, the individual who cannot command themselves under the severest of stress is not fit to govern reality. And it's the truth, because until you can rise above the internal storm, the external storm is going to keep smacking you about, smacking you back and forth. And it's really important that you have the ability to exercise the understanding, because I want to emphasize this. Higher frequency doesn't mean that you're smiling all the time and it's just like you've done crack. That's not what higher frequency means. Higher frequency is an elevated level of consciousness, a higher perspective. To be able to go onto the mountain. Every major prophet in the Bible went upon a mountain to encounter God. 2:30 says, for the place that I have seen God is called Pineal, right? And whenever God sees these individuals, or these individuals come across God, whether Moses or Jesus or Elijah, they go up into a mountain. Esoterically, what that's representing is you going above the world, raising and transcending above the common, let's say the commonalities of how everybody in the world would perceive things. And you need to be able to go up on the mountain above all of these things, because until you're able to do that, you won't reach the pinnacle at the top, which is your desired reality. And there's some simple questions that you could really ask yourself in order for you to truly understand if you're giving up what you want. But before you can truly do these things, there's something so important that if you don't listen to, everything that you've just watched up until this point will be for nothing. And that's not an exaggeration, because all of this stuff is a system in of itself. It's a spiritual science. Nigga, you miss one ingredient, boom, it's a mad thing. In the same way that Franklin Saint was teaching those people how to cook crack, I'm teaching you how to cook up a new frequency for real. And these are the questions you should be asking yourself. So, remember, truly sacrificing comes down to one thing in particular. Seeing reality through the lens of your desired self. So when something pops up in your reality, like I said, you're always choosing between two frequencies. You have the choice. What you're going to have to do, whether you realize this or not, you're going to now have to filter everything through the lens of your desired self. So, how would my desired self act? How would they act? How would they think? Where would they place their attention? What would be their identity? What would be their beliefs? Every single belief that you got right now has to go, my guy. Every single one, it has to go. Every single place that you're placing your attention, it has to go. Every single place every single thought that you're having, it has to go. Every single emotional convention, damn. Every single emotional convicted belief that you have has to go now. So long as you have all of these still the same, you ain't going anywhere. You have to sacrifice your current self in order to make space for your new self. Your new self has been trying to get to you for a minute, but it can't get to you because the space is being taken up by your current self, which you're addicted to because frequency is the most addictive substance in the world. And you have to have the ability to break off every single one of these things from how they're currently comprised and filter reality through the lens of your desired self. Because once you alter your perception, you alter your projection. This is an alteration of the vibrations of each one of these qualities. And each one of them has to all systematically in a line be recorrected and renewed. Be ye renewed by the transforming of your mind, as it says in Romans, I believe. Now, like I said, it all comes down when a situation pops up that is trying to trigger you or is trying to get to you. You're going to have to first pause, because the truth of the matter is you can't control your first thought, but you can control your second thought, and that's perfectly fine. You're going to have to think to yourself, how would my desired self react? How would they act in this situation? What would they think? What would they believe? What would be their identity? Because the more that you're able to do that, what you're doing right now is tapping into a parallel universe where that reality already exists. And when you're tapping into that parallel universe where your desired self is the current reality, you are extracting the frequency of that, bringing it down to materialize it in your current reality. And this is the game. This is really the game. You need to give up your lower for a higher. Now, to emphasize what I'm saying more, once again, currently caterpillar, you want to become a butterfly, the caterpillar doesn't think like a butterfly, and the butterfly doesn't think like a caterpillar. The way they see the world is from two completely different perspectives. And you need to step into the perspective that you'd have in that desired reality to materialize it now, because the truth of the matter is there is no future. Instead of thinking, oh yeah, I'll do that then, you're projecting it into something that doesn't exist. You need to live in the future until you have no conception of the future. There should be no future in your mind. Because the only time that exists is the now. So what I say to you is, from now, you need to sacrifice. And I say this to all of my clients when they first work with me. I say to them, everything that you've currently been doing from a point of frequency, that's gonna have to change. That's gonna have to completely change. That's how Jake went from being stuck at 50K per month for like 8 months to hitting 75K in 2 weeks in his plumbing business. All from a change of frequency, all because I said to him, hey, you can't be moving like this. You can't be moving how you're moving right here, in order to go somewhere you've never been, you need to become someone you've never been. So if you're an entrepreneur who's stuck at a revenue ceiling and you want to break out in the next 7 weeks, link in the description. But he had to give up his present conceptions, his viewpoint, his beliefs, his identity, his thoughts, his emotional conviction. He had to give it up in order to go to a new level. And it's the same thing with you. And I've just broken that process down. So the final thing that I want to say while I end this video is give up the lower nature for the higher nature.
Take a look around your room. What do you see? I'm going to guess some walls, a collection of objects. My face flapping away on your screen. However, if you look slower, look deeper at any given object, you're going to find something strange. Give this a try. If you stare at an item for even a couple of minutes with unbroken sight, what seems still and solid suddenly becomes considerably more wiggly, almost vibrating. Maybe it's just a trick of the senses, you say. Well, science too tells us that nothing is really still. The atoms that make up objects are vibrating. And you've got to see this. According to the most advanced imaging technology we have, cells themselves are like these cosmic flowing ecosystems. Great philosophers and contemplatives say the same thing. To quote Professor Eric Steinhardt, who's paraphrasing the great Neoplatonic philosopher Plotinus, every production of matter is a lie, is no true reality, but a merely deceptive simulation. Of course, here we're just talking about the physical world, but what about everything else that we hold to be important? Our identity, our ideas, our religious and political alignments, your philosophical beliefs, are those real? By what standard? Is anything real? And if so, what does it mean for me, my own psychospiritual context, my own ability to make sense of reality, find knowledge, find purpose in life? Dizzying questions, for sure. Some would argue you should just leave questions like this alone. I disagree. Not only do I disagree, I can't do it. And I know many of you can't leave big questions like this alone either. So what is reality? What is real? Do we live in something akin to a simulation or a matrix? And on a related note, what is truth? What is knowledge? There's definitely no shortage of supposed answers to those questions out there. But in decades of searching, there's one way of seeing that I really believe shines a light on questions like this. A way of seeing that really does cut through the illusion and will forever transform your understanding of reality and your life. The ancient Greek philosopher Plato's allegory of the cave is the gateway to this way of seeing. It's not only one of the oldest ways of cutting through the illusion, but most multi-layered and mysterious versions of what today we would call the whole matrix or simulation scenario. And for those of you thinking, oh, I already know this cave allegory, trust me, there are rarely discussed, massively powerful esoteric insights that we're going to cover in this exploration. But first, the basics. What is it? Broadly, the cave story is a thought experiment from Plato's most sprawling work, The Republic. In it, Plato, through his teacher Socrates, tells us, or specifically in the story, Glaucon, Plato's brother. Also, this is just dawning on me, I love that we could construe this as Plato sort of indirectly calling the reader his brethren by having his teacher Socrates address his brother Glaucon. Anyway, through the voice of Socrates, Plato tells us to imagine a cave that descends deep into the ground. In it, there is a very strange Matrix-like scenario in which unsuspecting people have spent their entire lives chained up, facing a wall. On the wall, they witness shadows depicting all sorts of things: animals, people, dramas. Season 1 of MILF Manor. Yes, somehow MILF Manor is a real show. I was trying to look up the most vapid reality TV show I could find, and that was it. Seemed like the perfect modern example of a shadow on the wall. Anyway, these shadow dramas are the cave denizens' entire world. So, of course, they become obsessed with it. They argue about what they see. They are totally enamored with this shadow reality, so much so that they never question it. Eventually, though, Socrates has us imagine that one of these prisoners is freed. That for the first time in his life, he turns away from the wall and sees the deeper truth that these shadows are merely projections of objects passing in front of a fire, that there are people orchestrating these shadow dramas. But despite what you might think, the prisoner does not actually make a break for it. He's overwhelmed, terrified, confused by what he sees. He wants to go back to his familiar shadow world. Socrates tells us that the freed prisoner would likely need to be dragged out of the cave because it's just too overwhelming and confusing. And when this happens, again, he would reach yet another level of being overwhelmed and confused. This time by something far greater than just an object passing in front of a flame. This time he's overwhelmed by the blinding, luminous grandeur of the outside world itself. It takes quite some time for the prisoner's eyes to adjust to the true light of reality, but eventually they do. Quote, slowly his eyes adjust to the light of the sun. First he can see only shadows, gradually he sees the reflections of people and things in water, and then later see the people and things themselves. Eventually he's able to look at the stars and moon at night, until finally he can look upon the sun itself. Only after he can look straight at the sun is he able to reason about it and what it is. So our freed prisoner, whether he likes it or not, is essentially an enlightened being with multi-dimensional knowledge, at least compared to the people who are still locked up in the cave muttering about shadow dramas. Given that, Socrates argues that it becomes the freed prisoner's duty, his philosophical burden, to return to the cave and share what he's learned. But just like before, the freed prisoner doesn't want to go back. And it turns out he's right to, because Socrates tells us that when he does, he will be ridiculed. He will be called mad for what he tells the people still locked up in the cave. And not only will this newly minted philosopher have an uphill battle if he's ever going to free anyone, Socrates actually says they will likely unalive him before they follow him out. And of course, this is a reference that Plato is making to the fact that this is exactly what the powers that be in Athens did to Socrates himself. Now, I'm sure you already see where this is going thematically and metaphorically. Of course, something like this cave scenario really is the state of our world, because most people, and let's be honest, we ourselves are mostly enamored by things akin to shadows on the cave wall. And even if you're not at the very bottom of this level, if you're not at the MILF Manor level, this is still true of you. Further, higher truth, if we ever find it, is absolutely overwhelming when we're confronted by it. And as much as we or anyone says they want it, in reality, they're resistant, especially when it challenges their status quo, shakes up their worldview, clashes with their beliefs, their belief system, their BS, as one of my favorite authors, Robert Anton Wilson, often put it. Yet if you are able to find some real wisdom from beyond the cave, or simulation, if you like, it's kind of a burden, because like the prisoner, it becomes your duty to share that wisdom. This, Socrates / Plato are arguing, is the burden of the philosopher, the burden of the wise. So that, in a nutshell, is a basic summary of the cave tale. And this on its own is powerful, it is relatable, so much so that we can easily project our own egos onto it. A taste of this story, in that sense, is actually a bit dangerous, because we can delude ourselves into thinking that we aren't the ones in the cave, we're the ones who are free. We're not sheep, we see the simulation for what it is. But on the contrary, the very first piece of wisdom is to see that you are the prisoner. You are the one enamored with the shadows on the wall. You are the one living in a simulation comprised of your own beliefs, opinions, and worldview. We are the ones reluctant to leave, and there are always forces, both psychological and societal, maybe even spiritual, that are trying to pull us back down. So where does that leave us? What if we do want to climb out of the cave and we're ready to carry the burden of higher wisdom? Well, if we want to go there, we've got to go into deeper layers than you're going to typically find in conversations about the cave. And we are going to get there, I promise. But first, there are some absolutely vital pieces of wisdom we cannot skip over if we want to fully understand the wisdom of the cave that come from earlier in the same text, Plato's Republic. The first is the sun. What is it that the sun really represents to Plato? Because remember, in the cave allegory, the sun is the thing that symbolizes ultimate truth. It is what the freed prisoner must gaze directly upon if he wants true knowledge, true freedom. To begin to get an idea of why, we need to go back to Socrates' discussion of the sun, which also was with Plato's brother Glaucon. So Glaucon asks Socrates a truly massive question. He wants to understand what the form of the good is. A quick word about forms, I'm going to speed run this. The idea of forms are central to Plato's entire philosophy. They are the opposite of the particular and the source of the particular. You can think of these as archetypes, but not just psychological archetypes. These are ontological archetypes that really exist. So of course we see particular cats running around. All of those cats, according to Platonic thought, emanate from one perfect form of catness, an archetype of catness. And the same is true of all things. Now, at the height of all of these forms sits this thing that Glaucon is asking Socrates about, the form of the good. Glaucon wants Socrates to explain this pure, unadulterated source of all goodness and wisdom and beauty and order in reality. I am with you on that, Glaucon. But of course, Socrates says this is not quite possible for him to put into words. But what he can do is give him a simile. And to do this, he talks about the highest concept in the physical world, the sun. Quote, as goodness stands in the intelligible realm to intelligence and the things we know, the sun stands in the visible realm to sight and the things we see. And to make this arrangement more clear, Socrates calls the sun the child of goodness, the offspring of goodness. And it makes sense why he would compare the two, right? The sun is essential for our world's existence. Its overflowing luminosity and blinding beauty feeds everything on the planet. Nothing would be visible, nothing would be alive if it weren't for the sun. But the sun also overwhelms, right? It's too much for our senses. You can't even look at it without destroying your eyes. But as grand as it is only a child of the higher beauty and truth that is the form of the good. I'm sure the standard view is to take this pretty metaphorically, but I don't think Plato and Socrates are really being metaphorical here. I think that he's demonstrating that there's a real relationship between the sun and the transcendent form of goodness that exists in the higher intelligible realm. That they are literally related in a sort of metaphysical, ontological chain of being. More on that later. So this form of the good, it's something we can know to a degree, like the sun, but ultimately it is transcendent, or at least something we cannot fully know through traditional methods of knowledge acquisition. I was really trying to boil this down into something concise, and the best I could come up with is the form of the good is the mystery that makes the world make sense. It is the thing that allows you to make sense of the world through the application of your mind. So returning to the cave, this brings another layer of insight, another layer to the duty of the freed prisoner or the new philosopher, that they should, like the sun, shine goodness and truth onto others through learning and through living in tune with this wisdom of the form of the good. So this is what the sun represents to Plato and Socrates. And we'll get more into what it actually means to live in tune with the form of the good later, because there's another fundamental mystery we need to get to first if we want to even think about freeing ourselves from the cave. And here we're going to start to answer the question of what knowledge is, how to acquire knowledge, how to value knowledge, what it means to be wise and free of the cave or the simulation, according to Plato and Socrates. And I don't think it's going to be what most of you think. First of all, is that even possible? After all, Socrates himself, perhaps his most famous utterance is that all he knows is that he knows nothing. And the Oracle of Delphi supposedly dubbed him the wisest man in all of Athens because of it. Well, that is true. and kind of not true, depending on how you look at it. I have a theory on it. We will get there by the end of the video. But first, another key concept that is core to this idea of what wisdom is, and also reflects the entire journey out of the cave. And this is the famous divided line allegory. This again comes from earlier in Plato's Republic. Really, it's right before Plato's cave. It leads into Plato's cave. And according to Socrates, this divided line that is broken up into 4 sections demonstrates that there are varying kinds or purities of knowledge, that there is a hierarchy, an epistemological hierarchy. These 4 grades of knowledge are akasia, pistis, dianoia, and noesis. Each of these 4 kinds of wisdom represent a kind of cognition, a kind of knowing, a level of knowing. Translating them from the ancient Greek at all, especially into modern English out of the context they were originally used in, kind of trashes them, but of course, this is what we must do as non-Greek speakers. So first we have akasia. This is the knowledge of images, likenesses, opinions, also gets thrown in here. In the cave allegory, this is akin to only knowing of the shadows on the wall. Then we have pistis. This is usually translated as belief or faith. In the cave allegory, this is the object passing in front of the flame that projects the shadow. This would also pertain to, if we use our cat example from earlier, if I'm drawing a picture of a cat, this would not be pistis. It would be the cat itself that is pistis. Now, as we move from pistis to dianoia, we cross a really important threshold. We go from talking about ways of knowing that exist only in the physical world to ways of knowing that are intelligible, ways of knowing that exist in the mind. And this is an actual statement about hierarchy to Plato and Socrates. The ways of knowing of the mind are hierarchically superior to these lower kinds of knowing that only exist in the physical. The first way of knowing is dianoia. This is our capacity to do things like math and logic. In the cave allegory, this is the point in which the prisoner sees the outside world, but he only sees the reflections in the water. He's not able yet to gaze directly upon the sun. And speaking of gazing on the sun, this is noesis. This is direct apprehension of the forms. This is abstract, nuanced, complex. We're going to get deeper specifically into noesis later. So these are the 4 kinds of knowing, the 4 grades of knowing on Plato's divided line. We need to talk, though, about the line itself, because the line itself has some special features, and it really demonstrates the kind of multi-dimensional wisdom and the esoteric knowledge that's embedded in Plato's work. Now, if you follow the directions Socrates gives, there's only one correct way to construct the line. And when you do it, you get a very special proportion. You get the golden section. Of course, it is widely believed that the golden ratio is an expression of great beauty. It is ubiquitous throughout the design world, and in art, you will find it approximated in nature all over the place. It's symbolized in various mathematical applications in the form of phi. And as you may or may not know, Plato was obsessed with geometry. On the outside of Plato's academy, it said, "Let none ignorant of geometry enter here." And he was a deep student of Euclid's Elements, Euclidean geometry. But the sacred geometry goes much deeper than that, my friends. A truly dedicated researcher by the name of John Bremer discovered something absolutely insane in Plato's Republic after, get this, counting every single syllable in Plato's Republic. This is a work of over 200,000 words, by the way. What he found is that the divided line literally is an important dividing point in the entire work. That the divided line literally divides this massive work into a golden section. I'm going to say this again. Plato purposefully placed the divided line at the exact ratio in the text. He created the exact golden ratio in the text through where he placed the divided line analogy. Is your head exploding yet? Because your head should be exploding. Imagine the planning necessary on Plato's part to pull this off. And by the way, this is just scratching the surface of other hidden geometric themes and Pythagorean harmonic themes in Plato's Republic. Once again, I am speedrunning this. If you want more specifically on what I'm getting at here, there's some links in the description that explain it in more fine-grained detail. And I think even already you can begin to appreciate the fact that Plato's work is like this multi-layered onion of meanings. It's like a literary psychic megalithic pyramid or something that encodes all kinds of secrets. So now that we know what the divided line is, the 4 types of knowledge, and the hierarchy they sit in, now we see another layer of depth to Plato's cave, that the whole journey out actually exemplifies the different kinds of knowing, the different grades of knowing. And to nutshell it, that means if you fully want to know, fully understand something, it's not just about how you feel. It's not just about your opinions or how things seem according to your senses. I want to be clear, it's not that akasia and pistis, these worldly ways of knowing are wrong. We require them. But if we want to be free of the cave, we have to go further. We have to be able to question things logically, investigate our own bias and behavior. You need to be able to wrap it in logic, see it in its full context, fully digest information from all angles. Because if you're not, that is, you're not deconstructing things to get to the deeper truth, you're trying to preserve your own worldview, your own opinion. But what's that you say? Still not esoteric enough? Well, I was hoping you would say that. So let's take it there, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say, even if you knew everything or have thought of everything up to this point, I don't think you've ever heard what I'm about to tell you. What if all of this, the cave, the sun, the divided line, what if it's not just a metaphor about how to think? What if it's not just an epistemological hierarchy, a kind of, purities of knowledge, like I was talking about earlier? What if it's an actual map of reality itself? What if we do, not metaphorically, live in a false, or at least limited, shadow cave reality? And what if we could, like the prisoner, climb out of that simulation into a higher reality? What if Plato is providing us a hint here of how we could do that? Well, this is precisely what many Platonic sages believed, that reality is comprised of a massive web or chain of forces, beings, archetypes, and that we live very close to the bottom of said chain, of said hierarchy. The good news, though, is that we can, to a degree, and there's debate about this, climb that chain into higher forms of knowledge, higher realities. And that this chain stretches all the way back to that transcendent goodness and oneness that we were alluding to earlier when we were talking about the form of the good. And speaking of Platonic sages who went incredibly deep into this, let's talk about Proclus. Proclus of Athens was the head of Plato's revived academy. He lived from about 412 to 485 CE. Actually, I just want to pause here and fully acknowledge the scope of this man's genius. He was preposterously prolific. He wrote like it was a sacred duty, like he was literally on fire on a daily basis. He was identified as brilliant from a young age. He mastered math and logic, took over Plato's revived academy from his teacher Syrianus when he was in like his mid-20s. This is a man who fully dedicated his entire soul to the pursuit of wisdom in every conceivable way. He even has some miraculous events to his name, apparently. So I just wanted to establish who we're talking about here. We're talking about a philosopher, wizard, sage, genius. Anyway, according to Proclus, this is what the divided line really is. It is an occulted piece of Pythagorean wisdom. And by the way, discussing what that is, Pythagoreanism, this is a whole other rabbit hole that could slurp us right in. Just to give a little bit of context, this is a lineage that spawned from the pre-Socratic philosopher, mystic Pythagoras, who seemed to have some sort of philosophical, mathematical mystery school. He predates Plato, and it is widely believed that Plato himself was an initiate of this Pythagorean wisdom, because there are Pythagorean themes and hidden pieces of geometric and harmonic wisdom all throughout Plato's works. But back to this idea of the divided line actually secretly being a map of reality. According to a paper by Professor Pieter de Hoyne entitled The Metaphysics of the Divided Line in Proclus, quote, Proclus's main concern is not so much with the epistemology of the divided line, but rather with its metaphysics and the ontological map it provides for the ascent of the prisoner from the cave. Mic drop. Just kidding, there's a ton more. One way of doing that, of climbing that ladder of reality, the professor goes on to highlight is, and this probably won't be popular with many of you at first, is math. But before you rage quit this video because math boring, really if you think about it, math is incredibly mysterious. Why is it that it can pierce into reality so deeply? Why is it that we can use this thing we just call math to describe the very physical laws of reality? Curious enough. But now let's go into some territory that truly melted my brain and took me a while to fully comprehend. The first thing I want to make clear is I'm not talking about mathematical notation here, the symbol system that we use to demonstrate and talk about math. I'm talking about what that symbol system points to. Whatever those truths are, of course, we can't capture them fully, and we can't find them anywhere in physical space, yet we can and do logically use them and prove them to be true all the time, not just on pieces of paper, but in the inventions that we use to do everything. There are millions of cars on the road right now. There are thousands of airplanes in the sky, zillions of videos being watched on the internets, all because of math and logic. But not just math and logic, the deeper truths that they point to. But what are these truths, and why can the human mind, through using math and logic, access them? And this is where I, even as someone who detested math growing up, this is where even I get chills. According to Proclus, we can do this because our intellect, a word that is typically, in Greek, the word that's used is nous. We translate it into English as intellect, or mind. It's because our nous is not really ours. We are participating in it, but it's not ours. Like in the allegory of the cave, intellect, nous, is projected into our souls, into our psyches, as are the higher truths and principles that exist in that realm of mind. So just like the shadows on the wall in the cave story, these higher realities cast a shadow down into our level of reality. So there is a shadow of a higher reality on the wall of our psyches. As such, we can, to an extent, recognize the signature of those higher realities and use it to learn about them through things like math and logic. Quoting from the professor's paper again, mathematical forms constitute a subclass of the entire realm of dianoetic forms. According to Proclus, it is by projecting or bringing forth and unfolding these innate logoi, of which the soul is essentially constituted, that discursive reason generates the entire manifold of mathematical sciences and theorems. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, it's essentially what I was getting at earlier. These logoi, or intelligible forms, as he calls them, these are the higher truths that math and logic point to, are the shadows of. These intermediate forms are projecting themselves down into us, emanating from an even grander truth than we can fully comprehend at our level of reality. Yet we can comprehend them to an extent using our psyches, our souls, especially our rational faculties, our dianoia, our noesis. So according to Proclus and many other Platonists, by the way, the development of these rational faculties, these ways of knowing on the higher parts of the divided line, it's incredibly important to work on and develop these faculties if we want to be free of the cave. Because again, according to Proclus, and I'm paraphrasing this paper now, The intermediate forms are reason principles that are the essence of the soul, and by virtue of that, we're able to comprehend the forms in a way or at a level that is proper to our own nature as humans. Proclus is arguing that we can use these faculties to climb the ladder of reality itself, to climb our way to higher levels of reality through higher levels of cognition. This is obviously so different than the way we typically think about math and logic now, but it's not just ancient philosophers. There are mathematicians that call themselves Platonists, or at least mathematical Platonists, because of this. I've referenced him before, but Roger Penrose may be the most famous one. He's a Nobel Prize winning physicist. He openly calls himself a mathematical Platonist for this reason, because he believes these mathematical truths exist for real in some unseen, what he calls Platonic realm that we can only reach when we've sharpened our minds. Essentially, our world, our minds, even nature encode these higher mathematical principles, these higher realities, these intermediate forms, in a kind of as above, so below way. Watch this video for more on that whole subject. I really hope I did a decent job connecting those dots for you, because that's a whole wrap that really tickles my soul, perks up my wonder whiskers. And that's part of the point. Interfacing with this stuff over and over again does start to change your mind. It does start to alter your perception of reality, put you in awe, makes you want to appreciate, even venerate, the beauty of the world and reality. And this brings us to the shore of something that I promised that we would get back to, this highest kind of knowing, noesis, which, if you recall in the cave story, noesis is exemplified by the prisoner directly viewing the sun, and more casually, we can say that it means to have a direct experience, direct cognition of a form. Of course, this is difficult to talk about. It might be the most difficult thing to talk about of everything we've covered so far, in that it is just the most distant thing from our everyday experience, yet it's also the truest and purest. And riffing on noesis is also really going to bring us full circle. First, let's go for a straightforward explanation that I stumbled across on a website, which I really like. The difference between dianoia and this highest kind of knowing, noesis. In contrast, noesis presupposes a soul has turned away from specific selfish concerns to seek the good itself. With this change in mental orientation, we may then begin to see things more truly and in their proper relation to one another. We may better think, judge, and therefore act according to natural law and right reason. We will consequently be more harmonized with the external world as well as within ourselves. Good stuff, but it's also pretty general. So let's once again go deeper, and let's once again probably scramble our brains by looking to the work of the brilliant Plotinus, the thinker considered to be the founder of Neoplatonism. And to give you an idea of his flavor, if you're not familiar with him, he had a reputation for being almost a yogic, contemplative, philosophical mystic. And on that note, if you've been waiting for someone who absolutely seems to have escaped the cave via mystical experience, via some kind of deep consciousness modification, Plotinus is your man. What follows is going to be a mixture of quoting and paraphrasing Plotinus's direct writings from the Enneads, and also a paper by Professor David P. Hunt. Noesis is a kind of deep contemplation that merges us with a deeper level of reality, or a higher level of reality. Plotinus equates hypostases, or levels of reality, with the relative strength or weakness of the contemplation which occurs in them. He says that a soul has, quote, won its way to the intellectual realm, this realm of nous, this higher realm of mind, if it beholds a contemplation, if it reaches a mode of consciousness that is of its order. That on a deeper level, really all of reality is some sort of noesis, some level of cognition. which just like in the physical stratas of life and all of its different organisms, that there's some kind of mental version of that, some kind of psychic version of that. So that quote, the clearest thought is also of the highest life. The highest life is identical with the highest intelligence. The supreme life is also the supreme thought. The life of the second rank is also the thought of the second rank, the lowest rank, etc. So to be clear, I know this sounds abstract, but it's because we can't say what these levels of contemplation of knowing are. We can't say what these mystical states of consciousness are that lie outside the cave. We have to experience them ourselves. Plotinus does attempt to explain it in his writings, but of course it's nothing like the impact of experiencing it for ourselves. We have to be in them. We can't even mathematically describe them or logically describe them with our faculty of dianoia. Or rather, if we could, we'd be talking about a lower level than noesis. We wouldn't be in this state of contemplation that noesis entails. A noesis of something means that your psyche, your soul, has risen to the level of it. You have, in a sense, achieved it or become it. And now that we've at least attempted to climb that whole ladder of the divided line, we arrive at the deepest truth of Plato's cave. Again, to paraphrase from that same paper and Plotinus himself, all knowledge then is self-knowledge, because it is only when a soul is able to raise itself that it can gain knowledge of higher forms. But this is only when the soul becomes that very higher form which it contemplates. And as Plotinus says, by what sort of simple intuition could one grasp this which transcends the nature of intellect? We shall say to the person to whom we have to explain that this is by likeness in ourselves. So to put it simply, how is it that we become like the higher when we really are the lower, when we're stuck in this lower realm, when we're stuck in this cave? We have to embody it. We have to understand it through doing, through being, through expanding our minds. And this is possible because, like we said earlier, that a trace of the higher exists within us. There's a shadow of the higher world on the wall of our psyches. As Plotinus says, a trace of the capital G good is seen in it, our souls. And it is the likeness of this that one should conceive its true archetype, forming an idea of it in oneself from the trace of it which plays upon intellect. So we have to learn to recognize the traces of that higher world, that higher truth within ourselves, within our own minds. Of course, we do this through seeking knowledge, seeking after truth, throwing away our bias, throwing away the ego games to the greatest extent that we're able to hold truth and beauty above all else. Also contemplate and recognize the various ways in which the form of the good shines here in this world, and how our deepest truths, our mathematical laws, are all reflections of it. Then we slowly unravel, begin to understand the nature of this mysterious form of the good. And through understanding it, we begin to become more like it. So very simply, just become God. And since I said the taboo G word, I just want to take a moment to reflect on that, because think about how different what we just outlined in this video is than the typical way that we think about faith, the typical way that we think about what it means to be spiritual. It's all about saying, I believe this, I associate with this group, I don't associate with that group. And I'm really not trying to strawman anyone's beliefs here, but where does that kind of rationale, that kind of thinking sit on the divided line? What matters is what you do, what you think, what you are, what you exemplify, and whether or not you're raising your psyche to higher and higher realizations about yourself and the nature of reality. To do that, to reach this way of knowing, or really I would say being, we have to undergo some kind of really alchemical transformation. I think we take a step into the mystical for sure, because this change in orientation is also a change in the understanding of ourself, what we are. that we are an emanation of something higher and truer. And when we have that realization, we achieve a huge change in orientation. We're way less concerned with the shadows on the wall. We're way less concerned with MILF Manor. Being free of the cave means that you're no longer governed by the ego or these outer world associations, that you're trying to embody this higher transcendent archetypal wisdom that you're seeking after for the rest of your life. This is why Plotinus really has a reputation for being this inward-facing, almost yogic Platonist, why he a number of times stresses the importance of deep contemplation, what today we would for sure call meditation. Because through that inner work, you begin to see these shadows of the higher world, the light of the inner sun. This is why Proclus wasn't just writing like a madman and doing rigorous math and logic, but he prayed. He did rituals multiple times a day, according to his biographer. Plutarch, who we haven't talked about at all, another really prolific Platonic philosopher, was also a priest at the Temple of Delphi. Iamblichus, another Neoplatonic sage, was said to have been an Egyptian priest. And probably most piercingly, it's why Socrates was willing to give his life. Because he knew it was the right thing to do, the virtuous thing, more consistent with the form of the good than avoiding his death, which it seems like he easily could have. You don't live your life or end your life in the manner of any of the above if the mystical dimension isn't a felt reality in your life. But notice none of the above people that I just mentioned entered this what we could call mystical or spiritual territory at the expense of education or critical thinking. In fact, this spirituality can really be seen as the culmination of the sharpening of the intellect and the education of the individual. And all of the above is just why I am so moved by this, why this is the only kind of thinker that I will forever fail toward being. Could you imagine if this was our approach to education and wisdom seeking and psycho-spiritual understanding? You know, imagine if we could alchemize all of that. And on a related note, that's really part of the prescription of the Republic in general, to understand what it means to wield your soul well. Plato actually calls this state where all three parts of the soul are harmonizing justice. More on this idea in this video. And that's a good segue towards some closing thoughts here, because I know this is really broad and big ideas about what knowledge is and what reality is. It is not just theoretical. There is a serious personal dimension to this as well, because if we can get even a little bit closer to that state that I was talking about just before, that state of living in a way where our soul is becoming more like the form of the good. For me, just in the process of making this video, my awe and wonder levels have been noticeably amped up. I'm more motivated, my mind is clearer, my path feels more obvious. And on the note of finding your path, I mean, it's impossible for me not to mention this, though we absolutely don't have time to get into it here. I believe this climb out of the cave is, if not synonymous, really harmonizes with what one of my other philosophical idols, Carl Jung, calls individuation. That is our path of becoming who we naturally are, who we're uniquely meant to be. I've also got a whole video on that here. And though we're certainly not out of the cave in a meta sense, I do think, hopefully, we've reached some level of new height. And according to the allegory of the cave, the thing to do is return once again to the shadows and free someone or some part of ourselves. So, in the interest of making this practical, I will be seeking to identify the most pernicious shadows in my life. I will seek to be removing the MILF manners and trying to raise my psyche to higher levels. I hope you will do the same. But as always, this is baby steps. This is lifelong stuff. But maybe after decades of living in this way, of pixel by pixel, slowly starting to understand what the form of the good is and how it shines down into us, maybe we'll do what Socrates did. Not the drinking the hemlock part, but the elevating our own soul experience, the felt presence of the inner sun and its immortal, infinite, overflowing glory. And I have to imagine that if we ever do experience that unspeakable, ultimate mystery firsthand, free ourselves from the cave, from the simulation, for real, we'll truly know what Socrates meant when he said that he knew nothing. Big gratitude for hanging out for the balance of this transmission, my friends. My name is Michael Phillips. I know this was a rather girthy one. It was a huge undertaking for me, so I would greatly appreciate it if you tickled the algorithm with a like, a sub, a comment, a share. We've also got a huge catalog of podcasts, both here on YouTube and only on audio platforms. We've got hundreds more, so do subscribe to Third Eye Drops wherever you listen to pods. If you want to support more directly and you want to riff with me, hundreds of other Wonder Dippers, hang out on Zoom and a bunch of other stuff, join up over at patreon.com/Third Eye Drops. Again, so much love to you, and we'll see you in the next transmission.